So nobody's run down the hill yet. We always joke around here that, you hear something you don't like, and then I'm out of here. Yeah, run down the hill. So we actually had somebody do that. We also had somebody disappear in the middle of the night, too. Yeah, his parents called looking for him, and I think he was trying to ditch his parents, and he woke up the next morning and he wasn't here. And then I won't even get into the other stories. We have so many stories. Okay, so let's start with doing the visualization before we do the chanting. So remember the holy beings, their bodies made of light. We're surrounded by all the sentient beings. And we're leading them in taking refuge in the three jewels and in generating bodhicitta. And so likewise, we're taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. So in the West, many families have pets. And we love our pets. Whether you have cats or dogs or parrots, parakeets, pigs, there are pigs for fat, hamsters, frogs, goldfish, whatever it is. We look on these little beings with affection. But imagine having their mental state. What would go on in your mind all day long? What would your mind be capable of even thinking about? And then think of the leaders of the various terrorist organizations or militaries, or think of the people who dream up all sorts of conspiracy theories and deliberately spread misinformation. And what do they think about all day? And think of your friends and family who don't know anything about the Dharma, and what do they think about all day? What goes on in their minds? And let's say, let's speak of a bodhisattva living in our world. What do they think about all day? What's going on in their minds? And of those various living beings, which one do you want to be like? So while we are human beings in a human body with a human consciousness, let's use our body and mind wisely, use it to get ourselves out of samsara, and use it to be able to develop all the qualities necessary to really be an effective guide to other living beings and lead them out of samsara. So generate the bodhicitta. Yeah. What do you think about being a hamster? Is it scary? Yeah. And I think of, even one of our precious kitties, having a mind like that is really rather frightening. There's no freedom. That my very first meditation course, Rinpoche said that human beings are not very different from animals. Dogs wag their tail when somebody they like is there, and they bark and bite when somebody they don't like is there. And he said, similar with sentient beings, somebody or human beings, somebody we like comes, and we're pleasant and we're happy, and somebody we don't like comes, and we bark and bite, and yell and scream and criticize and so on. He said, what's the difference? Then he said, animals kill when they're either to stay alive because they're hungry or because they're being attacked. Human beings kill for all sorts of other reasons. Sport, defense. Have you ever noticed that every country has a Department of Defense? It would be more accurate to call it the Department of Offense. How can I get them before they get me? So human beings have human intelligence, but we can often use it. We often use it and act worse than animals. So it's just something to think about. And then when you look at your old friends, your non-Dharma friends, and your family, who don't know anything about karma, what kind of actions are they engaging in? What's going on through their mind all day? And how about us? We're not so different. When I was thinking of, about our kitties all day long, I want food, human beings similarly, but they're content to eat the same food every single day, every single meal. Wow, we would never put up with that. There has to be variety, even in one meal, and it has to taste good, it has to be fresh. And then they want to sleep when they want to sleep. Same thing, human beings. Basically, and they want to go for a walk when we want to exercise. And when they don't get what they want immediately, they let it be known. You can hear Upeka cry, in the evening when he wants a walk. This is the kind of, he's not totally black, but going in that direction, that you'll see down there, the big one. When he wants a walk, it's I want what I want when I want it. And we human beings are the same thing. I want what I want when I want it. So, Rinpoche kind of said, well, is your life going to be like the animal's life, or how are we going to distinguish ourselves from that kind of mind, that's only thinking about the happiness of this life? So that's our one of our challenges. So we left off the Buddha's life story yesterday, where he had gone to Deer Park in Benares, saw his 5 old companions who weren't going to say hello because he was a flake. But they wound up setting up a seat and inviting him to speak, and he taught the 4 truths. So yesterday we talked about, true dukkha, which is, basically a description of our lives. Yeah, unless anybody here is completely satisfied with everything about your life. Yeah. And where is that suffering come from? The overt suffering, as well as the unsatisfactory state of craving something and not getting what you want. Yeah, or getting what you want and being separated from it, or getting what you want and then it isn't as good as you thought it was going to be. Oh, that's the big betrayal, isn't it? Yeah, finally, I have what I've been craving, and it stinks. It's nice at the beginning, yeah, and then, okay, and not to mention aging, sickness, and death. So, where does it come from? The Buddha said it's not from outside. It's not other living beings. It's not the government. It's not the protesters. It's not, the mountains. It's not the cuckoo birds. It's coming from our mind, okay, in here. And the chief misconception of ignorance that misapprehends how we and all other phenomena exist. So things exist dependently. We apprehend them as if they had their own nature, inherent nature that made them what they are. And when, you may look and say, well, okay, maybe the thermos doesn't have that, but that's no big deal. Okay. But our sense of I am here. I am here, and I want something, and I deserve something, and I'm ticked off because you're not giving it to me. And that's why they always say, ay, ay, ay. It's I, and you get, it becomes ay, ay, ay. So, the way we think we exist is incorrect. But we're so used to it that we can't even question it. Yeah. And so how we interpret things in our life, similarly, we have our own interpretations of what happened. We have our own emotional reactions to things, and we're sure that all of these are correct and justified. Yeah, we don't question this kind of stuff. But we sure would like if the outside world would change. Okay, so, this is something really to look at and see how it's coming from in here. Okay, so that's the true origin, or sometimes the second one is called true cause. Yeah, what is the origin of our dukkha? Where does it come from? Okay, it's rooted in our own minds. Then the good news. Yeah, you like good news, right? especially those signs by churches, come for the good news. And they're Christian nationalists. That's not good news, is it? But anyway, the good news is that the true dukkha and true origins, these can be overcome. Yeah. How? Why? Well, if the origin is the ignorance in the mind, and the ignorance apprehends ourselves and other people and all phenomena as existing in a way that they do not, then when we can develop wisdom that actually understands how things do exist, that wisdom can demolish the ignorance because it perceives the opposite of what ignorance perceives. Ignorance perceives inherent existence. Wisdom, this liberating wisdom, perceives the emptiness of inherent existence. Yeah. If things did exist the way they appeared to us and the way we grasp them as existing, then awakening would be impossible because what we apprehend would actually be the way things are. Yeah. So because we apprehend things in a way that they aren't, when we realize that, those wrong graspings and wrong views can be obliterated. Yeah. So that's one aspect of the true path. Yeah. One way to describe the true path is by the 3 higher trainings, yeah, of ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. And that's a long explanation, yeah. Or another way of describing it is renunciation, or the aspiration for liberation, bodhicitta, and the correct view. It's another way of describing the path. Many different ways, okay? But they all center on developing this wisdom. Mm-hmm. So that's what the Buddha taught his old friends. And at least one of them became a stream enterer just by hearing it. And the others became stream enterers soon thereafter. Yeah. So we hear this story, we go, wow, they heard one Dharma teaching and they're, liberated, or maybe they had to hear a few. Well, okay, I came to 1 week of teachings. How come I'm not liberated yet? Yeah. And then when they talk about Tantra, they say, you can get enlightened in 1 lifetime, in this very lifetime. Okay, so I've been, I went to all these ceremonies where they ring a lot of bells, play drums, have blessed water and blessed pills and symbols and high thrones and hats, different kinds of hats. Yeah. And I went there and, I didn't understand anything, but wow, I got it. I was blessed. So yeah, 1 lifetime. By next week, I'm out of here. I'll open my own Pure Land. Yeah. What can I title my Pure Land? Yeah. Pure chocolate. So, we don't always understand the teachings properly, do we? So, so the Buddha taught his friends, and they soon became monastics, and then, thus started the Sangha. And then, as the Buddha taught, he taught for 45 years, so he would wander around India and teach whoever was interested. Yeah, he didn't have membership fees. He didn't have tickets that you had to buy in advance. He didn't have special bargain rates for if you don't have a lot of money. Yeah, anybody could come to the teachings for free. Yeah, there were no advertisements. Yeah, there was nothing on the internet, no posters saying, the Buddha is in this world. Come one, come all. This is your only time in your life to have this rare experience of meeting an enlightened one, and he will perform his magical powers in front of you and give you a big blessing. Boing! Yeah. So come. It's, in the national, they're holding it in the Capitol. Yeah. Along with the protests against Netanyahu today. And the Buddha is going to convert all those people. Yeah. So, no publicity. The Buddha just walked around, had the alms bowl, went into town every day, wherever they were. They did not beg. Some people say, oh, they're beggars. They called the bull a begging bull. They did not beg. They did not go and ask for food. Okay? They would walk with the bull, and this was an ancient Indian custom, so it's different than doing it here. But they would walk with their bulls, stand in front of a home silently. And if, it's a hot climate, so people are outside. If they saw them and, the monastic and wanted to offer food, they would offer food. If there were no food coming, then they silently went to the next house. Like we have downstairs. Yeah, it's to scare off animals. Yeah, or as a walking stick. I'm here, give me food. No, they didn't. Okay, they just stood there, and people who wanted to be generous gave food. And when they accepted the food, whatever was put in their bowl, they accepted. Yeah, you weren't even allowed to say thank you. Yeah, often they would chant a blessing verse. That was the thank you. Yeah. But there was no, oh, you're so kind, or you gave me spaghetti again. We had pizza yesterday with tomato sauce. I don't like so much tomatoes. Yeah. Can you take it out of my bowl and I want some, how about a banana split today? No, whatever was given, that was it. Yeah, and they accepted it. It was all put in one bowl, So you might hold your bowl so that at least the potatoes were in this side and the pickles were in the other side, so you could separate. But basically everything got put in one bowl and not separated, and you had it all mixed together, and you were grateful for the people's kindness and generosity in keeping you alive. Yeah. Hold on. Okay, hold your question. So the Sangha started that way. At the beginning, it was the way of taking or receiving ordination. The Buddha would simply say, "Come, O bhikshu." So yeah, come on, you're part of the club now. No, he just said, "Come, O bhikshu." And at the beginning, there were no precepts. There were no precepts. And because people, had some idea from watching the other mendicants of what was expected from them. And there were people who clearly had some kind of karma from previous lives, and some idea of ethical conduct. But after 12 years, there were some people that started misbehaving. And because, they misbehaved, because certain monastics misbehaved, then, and the Buddha heard about it, then he would make a precept saying, my disciples will not do X, Y, Z, whatever it was. As time went on, then the number of precepts accumulated. As the story goes, this is as the story goes, there were 6 naughty bhikshus, okay? And so because of them, then all the precepts came. Yeah. Or you can say because of them, or you could say, well, it was because of them, and therefore I have those precepts that guide me because I need them. Yeah. And what's interesting is when you read the Vinaya, it has the origin stories for each of the precepts. Now, there's different Vinaya schools, and the origin stories in all of them are not necessarily the same, okay? But the stories are very interesting because sometimes, sometimes the story isn't what you would expect it to be, okay? So let's take the precept of not killing. Yeah. I don't know about you, but when I think, setting up a precept of not killing, somebody, some monk must have gotten really mad and murdered somebody or clobbered somebody, something like that. Is that kind of what you would think about killing? Yeah. Well, it wasn't that somebody lost their temper and, killed somebody who they saw as an enemy. It's a very interesting story. There was a group of monks who were meditating on the mindfulness of the body, and in particular the foulness of the body, that the body contains all sorts of really unpleasant looking things that not only look unpleasant, smell unpleasant, feel unpleasant, And so they were doing a lot of meditation on their own bodies, of having the nature of being foul like that. And they developed so much dislike of having this body. They didn't meditate correctly on the mindfulness of the body, because you're supposed to come out of that meditation with thinking, this body is nothing worth being attached to. They did the meditation and came to the conclusion of, I don't want to be alive anymore and have this kind of foul body. So some other monks came to visit, and these monks who were meditating incorrectly said to the other monks, "We're tired of being alive with this foul body. Please kill us." Assisted suicide. So the visiting monks killed them. They asked for it. They asked to be killed. You're just doing what they want. And when the Buddha heard about this, and when he saw that, the number of monks had diminished, he said what happened, and it was explained to him, and that's where the precept of not killing came from. Okay. Now, what I find interesting, for example, with that, is the story's not what I would expect it to be, and that it's something, how often would that occur? That somebody would say, please free me of having this foul body and kill me. Not so often. But, what the Buddha was, to me, what this means is that, let alone things that I would think of as killing that should definitely be abandoned, even something like this, where somebody is requesting somebody else to take their life, even that falls under killing and is something we shouldn't do. Okay? The precept about lying, again, the story is that there was a famine. And so the naughty monks, the 6 naughty monks, they didn't want to go hungry. And they knew that people respected the mendicants. So especially mendicants who had high realizations and so on. So when they went to town, they would pretend to have all sorts of high realizations. They would speak about, how the devas, the gods, would appear to them and bow to them. They told all sorts of fantastic stories so that they would have a good reputation and people would give them food in the famine. And, many people were so poor, but they had so much respect for people on the religious path that they would give up their own food, their own family food, to give to them. So at the end of the famine, when the naughty monks went to see the Buddha, everybody else was like skin and bones and thin, and the naughty monks were, kind of round and looked, very well nourished. And the Buddha said, well, what happened? And then they told the story of how they lied and convinced people that they were very realized, and people gave them food. And the Buddha said, yeah. And so from there, that's how the precept against lying was established. Okay. And specifically, lying about your spiritual attainments. Now, when I first heard that, I was kind of new to the Dharma. And so again, a precept against lying, I wouldn't have thought this would be the origin story. Yeah. In my mind, it probably would have been somebody in business or somebody in government lying in order to get more offerings or more money in some way or more status. That's what I would think. But no, it was just these few monks lying about their attainments. And you could kind of say, well, they had a good reason. They were hungry. Yeah, what's wrong? They wanted to stay alive. They were hungry. What's wrong with them lying so they could have food and, in the famine? well, something's pretty wrong with it. Yeah, that was the origin story of the precept. Okay, so that means to me that even in dire situations, like you're starving during a famine, you don't lie. Yeah. So, these origin stories, when you think about them, there's a lot behind them, and we can update them to our present situation. You know? And most of the precepts, if you look at the affliction that was motivating that precept in the origin story, then we find we have those same afflictions. Okay. Maybe not in the exact situation, yeah, that happened in ancient India. Yeah. So sometimes, because the precepts were made for people living about 2,500 years ago in ancient India. Yeah. So we live at a different time in a different culture. But, when you look at the reason the precepts were made, what kind of mental state they were aimed at, we can see those mental states in ourselves. Yeah. But then there's some precepts that it would be really difficult to keep literally in our culture today. For example, there is a precept not to ride in vehicles. Anybody here who's never ridden in a vehicle? Yeah. Could you go, if you're not in retreat, could you go for a month without riding in a vehicle? How often have you gone for a month when you're not in retreat without riding in a car, on a motorcycle, on a plane? Yeah. So not so often. Yeah. So is that something that is practical in our culture, to not ride in vehicles? It would bring the whole world to a screeching halt, wouldn't it? Yeah. So what was the reason why the Buddha made that precept? Okay. Well, in ancient India, and in many cases it's similar in modern India, for example, if you go to Bodh Gaya, there's people on the bicycle rickshaws. You know bicycle rickshaws? Yeah. So there's a human being pumping, 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 and then you sit in the back like, you know, I'm sitting here and he's doing all the work. Or I remember one of the first times I went to Bodh Gaya, I think we took an ox cart from Gaya into Bodh Gaya, and the oxen are pulling us. Yeah, this was many years ago. Okay, so how does that relate? Why would the Buddha say the Sangha can't ride in vehicles? Well, in ancient India, who rode in the vehicles? Yeah, kings, business people, people who were probably a bit arrogant and said, pedal faster, beat the oxen so that they go faster. Yeah. So it would be harmful to other living beings to ride in that kind of vehicle. And it would also inflate our own arrogance, because we could just sit back and, somebody else is doing the work. So the way I interpret that precept, because I ride in vehicles and I fly in planes and so forth, okay, is when I'm in a vehicle, I should not be arrogant about what kind of vehicle it is and who's driving. okay? Because, you could very easily, if you didn't, if you said, okay, we can ride in vehicles, but we can't drive. Okay, our Theravada brothers and sisters see the precept in that way. Yeah, we can ride, but we don't drive. Okay. Then somebody picks you up in an old broken down VW versus somebody who's a wealthy benefactor who picks you up in your BMW with a chauffeur driving. Yeah. There's a little bit of a tendency of, my sponsor is quite wealthy. Look, he picked me up in this nice Beamer with this and this and this and this kind of things in the inside. And it was a chauffeur. And oh, you got picked up in that broken down VW Bug. Yeah, those are so old fashioned. Yeah. And your car is dirty, like the cars at the Abbey. Yeah. So you don't ride in that kind of vehicle. Or if you weren't expecting that kind of vehicle to pick you up, but it's there, you really watch your mind and you don't get arrogant. And you don't start talking about, oh, I got picked up by so-and-so, and, like that. Okay, so to guard the mind from arrogance. Okay, so, the Buddha set down all these precepts, but we have to look at them. We have to really study them. It's not just a list of do that and don't do this. Yeah, you really have to look at why. What is this precept getting at? Yeah, and how do I have that same affliction? And in what circumstances does my affliction manifest? Because that's when I have to be really careful. Okay, so, here, what you'll find, okay, each Buddhist tradition may have different ways of keeping the precepts according to their culture. Yeah, in Thailand, yeah, they go on Pindapat, they go on alms round. Okay, it's a hot culture. People have, their doors open. They're used to people coming with alms bowls. They have an idea of creating merit by making offerings to the Sangha. So it's totally culturally appropriate. Okay, we have some friends at Shasta Abbey in California, and when they wanted to go on alms round one time, so they went to the government office, to check if it was okay. They had to get a permit to have a parade. Because when you go on alms round, the Sangha walks in a line. Yeah, so if you're going through town in a line, it's a parade and you need a permit. Okay, we haven't gone on Pindapat in Newport. Yeah. But what we did here is we don't buy any of our own food. Okay, so just like in ancient times, they didn't buy food, it was food offered to them. So the same thing here, we eat, and now in the program, you're eating food that has been offered. Yeah, which means that people worked very hard at their job. Yeah, and instead of giving such and such amount of money for their family, they gave it to us so that we could eat. So that really changes your mind. It's very different than, oh, today I feel like having, smoked cheese. I'll just go to the grocery store and buy some. And I feel like eating these kind of cookies and this and this. And you go and buy what you want when you want it. Yeah, we don't do that. Okay. Can you hold a second? Okay. So we rely on what people bring. Sometimes people call us beforehand and they say, "What do you need?" And then we tell them. Okay. But it changes how you feel as a monastic if you eat food that somebody gave to you out of the goodness of their heart instead of giving it to their family or using it for themselves. Yeah. So it the Buddha set the situation up with the Sangha, like this, so that the Sangha gave teachings to the lay people supported the Sangha and led them in, in their meditation, gave them spiritual counseling and so on. So it was a um, a cooperative situation. Everybody had their own obligations and responsibilities. So, when you eat that food, then oh, I have a responsibility to practice well and to keep my precepts.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to better understand. So the Buddha and the first five were considered wandering mendicants. And then we say that the first five became monastics. So, like, what is different between a monastic and a wandering mendicant? And at that time, were there monastics and other traditions?
Well, I'm using the term monastic. Here, the Buddha said, "Come, O bhikshu." So that's what he called his disciples, bhikshus, and then later bhikshunis. Okay. So was using the gender neutral term monastic specifically for the Buddhist disciples. Okay.
I guess the question is just like, how is that different than a wandering mendicant?
Because they were Buddha's disciples, they were practicing the Buddha Dharma. They weren't practicing the Dharma of whatever other teacher they had. For example, like the Buddha's first two teachers who taught how to develop deep states of concentration, but you got those and you were still in samsara. So the Buddhist teachings were quite unique.
I got it. I'm just really curious to know that how the Abbey initially went about, just in the very beginning, to let people know that they were open to receiving offerings for their food, because it's just so.
Okay. Okay. Well, we had some friends who lived in northern Idaho, which is, the big mountain you see over there is Idaho. So very close. And so they were the ones who found the land. And so they knew, when I set up the Abbey, I said, this is how we're going to do it. So they knew. So actually, when we moved in the house here, the original residents were me and two cats. Okay, not the present four cats. Those are the newly ordained ones. Yeah, but so they knew, and when we moved in, there was food here. But they told me, these friends and other friends, because there aren't many Buddhists in this area. Okay, they said you're going to starve, and I said, well, let's just try it. Yeah, so we tried it. We haven't starved. One thing that how did we had to educate the people who came for teachings and kind of share with them what our lifestyle is and why it's like this. Also, I think what helped is, our friends who were here, they could tell their friends. But also, we had only been here a short time, and somebody from the Spokesman Review, the main newspaper in Spokane, came up to interview us, and what's this place in Newport, and so no, because nobody knew about us at that time, and still most people don't. But so when I was talking about this, I just said, we only eat the food that's offered, and I explained why we do it, and so on. Okay, so then they go and they print that story in the next Sunday paper under the lifestyle section, and the next day or two, sometime within that, up drives up the road, the country lane. It's not our driveway; it's a public road. But up country lane comes an SUV stuffed with food, driven by a woman who we've never met before, who says, I read the article about you in the Spokesman Review, and that you only eat the food that's given to you, and I wanted to bring you some food. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Would you do that? You saw an article in the food in the paper about, you might think, why are they, because the big complaint that lay people have, well, not the big complaint, a complaint in the West. Yeah, it's not the same in the Tibetan community, thank goodness, or the Chinese community. But in the West, the idea is go to work, get a job, earn your own money, and buy your own food. What are you expecting us to go buy your food and bring it here for you? You're an independent person. Go out and work, get a job. Yeah, many people feel that way. Yeah. So it was so amazing. And what we found as time went on, that, people would just read about us, and they started, some people would send food. Yeah. Well, there was one lady who lived in, I think it was United Arab Immigrants, and she read about us. She couldn't be here, but she, there's a thing where you can order food, fresh food from grocery stores, and they deliver it for you. She was sending us carrots and cauliflower and things like that. And we finally wrote to her, after we received a few boxes like this, and said, this is like they're using so much fuel driving it here, and then the boxes and the wrapping, it's really, creating a lot of waste products. And by that time, what had happened is one of our lay supporters kind of took it on herself to, and said people can send money, and then she organized the people who were coming to the Abbey, who would go and do shopping every week and then bring the food up here. Yeah. So then that lady sent money instead, which was certainly better for the environment. But we didn't know who she was. She just heard from somewhere. So it's really kind of amazing. There was one time when the refrigerator was empty, but and this was when I was here alone. But there was some food in the cupboards. There was canned food and all, And then soon after that, somebody brought fresh food. Yeah, yeah. And we set it up this way, if it's really good when you establish a community to set it up the way you want it to be, Because if we had started out buying our own food and then wanting to switch, that would have felt really not so good to people. The Buddha started setting up the Sangha, and he used the model of the wandering mendicants that was prominent in that society. So he did what was suitable for Indian society. Okay, and as people misbehaved, then more precepts were made. So, like I said, the initial ones were the 6 naughty monks. To be gender equal, yeah, there were also 6 naughty nuns. Yeah. But what happened, and this is not equal, is the nuns got almost all of the precepts that were established due to actions by the naughty monks. We also have to abandon those. But the actions done by the naughty nuns, the monks didn't have to abandon those. They didn't have the same precepts. So in the Vinaya, every Vinaya, the nuns have more precepts than the monks. Okay. At the very beginning, the Buddha did not ordain women because women weren't interested at the very beginning. Okay, because it was a very male-dominated society, and with very clear gender roles, who does what when, yeah, and so the men earned the living. They had the freedom to go out in the world. They could travel. They could do all these things, and just don't do what the naughty monks did. Okay. But in ancient India, the women, and to some extent it's still like this in certain areas in India, and certainly in other cultures too, the women's role is in home. There's a whole movement in the States, what they call the trad wives, the traditional wives, women giving up their careers to stay at home and have babies and raise kids. This is promoted by mostly the GOP, yeah, and Christian organizations. But so that was the role of women in India, and if a woman could not go into the village alone, because if you were a woman and you went into the village alone, you were a prostitute. Yeah. So when people wanted to insult the nuns, they would call them prostitutes. Yeah. And if a nun went into the town, on their own, that's what they got called. Yeah. So the women could not go into town alone. You had to have a companion. Yeah. And then also the thing is that the Bhikkhuni order began after the Bhikshu order. At the very beginning, it was just monks. And then I think it was 12 years later, yeah, something like that. I majored in history in college, but I can't always get the dates right. Excuse me. Uh, but it was either 6 years or 12 years. Does anybody remember? Yeah.
It was 12 years before the Buddha laid down precepts.
Yes.
So
It had to be after that. It was probably just after that. Yeah. So, so the women, the Buddha went back to his own village, to see his family the first time after he had become enlightened. He ventured home and like, uh-oh, what are my parents going to say? No, I think he was a little bit more self-confident than that. Yeah, but he started teaching in Yeah, a couple of us do. And, slowly the women started coming too when they were together or if they came with their husbands. And they wanted to be ordained as well, but they didn't see anybody else, any other women who were ordained. So when the Buddha left, he taught there for some time, and then he started walking. Yeah, he didn't jump into the next plane or the next Uber, to go to Vasali. He started walking there with his whole entourage of monks, and the women, a lot of the monks were from that village, and they had been married before, so they just, goodbye to their families and left because the family system was very much intact. If the husband left, there was the whole extended family would take care of the kids. So, but these women said, we want to ordain too. So you had the first women's march. Okay, they didn't carry placards. They didn't have a bullhorn. They shaved their head. They put on robes. They walked barefoot. Yeah, from Kapilavastu, many days' walk. They say 500 in the scriptures. 500 means a lot. It doesn't mean exactly 500. And they walked to where the Buddha was in Vasali, and then they requested ordination. Yeah. It's an interesting story because at first the Buddha said, don't, and the women were led by the Buddha's stepmom because his mother died right after he was born. So his mother's sister nursed him, took care of him, raised him, and so on. So she was actually the leader of the women's march, yeah. And 500 women went, and they went and requested ordination. And at first, the Buddha said, Mahaprajapati, that was her name, don't ask. And I guess it was a premier to don't ask and don't tell. But yeah, anyway, excuse my joke. Uh, so, at first he said, don't ask. So they came back, they were very persistent. And so Ananda, who was the Buddha's attendant, conveyed the message to the Buddha and said, there's this big women's march out there, and, no, basically he was very respectful, and they were very respectful, though, and they requested ordination. And he said, can women attain awakening? And the Buddha said, yes. And so Ananda said, well, shouldn't they be able to ordain? So then he ordained them. So then now you have the two sanghas, or the two orders, we could say, the bhikshu order, the bhikshuni order. And those continue down to the present day, but not in all Buddhist traditions. Because events happen during history whereby the lineage is broken, because it's when the Buddha set it up, at first it was you just took ordination by Kamo Bhikshu, but then he told the bhikshus to ordain other men, and he had the bhikshus also ordain the women. Okay. And then there were other situations that happened, so there were other forms of ordination. There was, for example, there was one woman who was apparently so beautiful that she couldn't go to where the ordination was because some men would jump her and rape her. So so they established, she was an exception. I think they only did this one time. But they sent a messenger. The messenger received the ordination and, received it as a way to convey it to her. So she received the ordination through messenger. That way of ordaining is not allowed today, okay? And then gradually, as more and more people ordained, then they established different rules for how the ordination was to be conducted and who could be in the ordaining sangha and so on and so forth. So all of that kind of got built up as time went on. Yeah, so they wandered around. Actually, the women weren't allowed to wander in the same way, and the people like to say, well, that's because women are the weaker sex, or they're so uncontrolled, so emotional. So they, none of that is true. I have many stories to tell about that. Emotional men, Yes, you volunteer? Okay. Okay. You're not as emotional as some of the men I've met. Yeah. I won't tell those stories right now. Yeah, but the women had to live in community, and they had to live close to the village where there were other people around. And they couldn't go out alone. They always had to have a companion. And even if you went with a group of nuns, you had to stay with the group. You couldn't lag behind. Because if you lagged behind, then people would say, oh, you're looking for a man. Because of course people assume it's the women who seduce the men. The men, no sexual energy at all. It's just the women who, kind of trap them and ensnare them. Yeah, right? Yeah, guys, what do you think? Yeah. Yeah. So, this is like ancient culture and modern culture in many ways. People believe this. Okay. Yeah, it was very interesting. I was talking to a geshe one time, and somehow we were talking about the celibacy precept. And I commented that my experience has been that the men have more difficulty keeping celibacy than the women do. And he was totally shocked. This geshe was just like, what? The men have more difficulty than the women? It was such a new idea to him. Yeah? So I've seen some expressions of astonishment here too. And then other expressions of people going, yes. And the gay people going, what in the world are you talking about? Yeah. But what happened as time went on, in India, well, not as time went on, but every year in India, there was the monsoon rains, okay, which are happening now. And I don't know if you've ever been in India, pre-monsoon, it is outrageously hot. And then when the rains come, it's torrential. I've never experienced anything in the US compared to monsoon rains in India. It's really like they have buckets, really you get, yeah. So, and so during that time, if the monastics went on Pindapat, they were walking across the rice fields, and destroying them because they were filled with water. That's how rice is grown there. But they would destroy the fields walking there. They would kill many bugs. There are bugs galore during monsoon. Yeah. And it was really not so good to go out and about. So the Buddha established this practice called Varsa, yeah, in Tibetan, Yarne, yeah. And what it is during the summer retreat, the 3 months of the summer, then the monastics stay put. And so what happened is people, the more wealthy people they would have a garden or a park or something, and they would offer it to the Buddha and his disciples, and then they would stay there for the duration of the Yarne. Yeah, they wouldn't go on Pindapat, and people would bring food. Yeah, but they stayed put. So that was actually the beginning of the monastics establishing monasteries, because at first everybody was wandering, okay? But then you're supposed to leave after Yarne, after Varsa, but some people didn't, yeah, and they would stay. We actually have a precept that you have to at least go out of the boundary the next day, But so some people stayed, and then slowly you began to have established communities of monastics. Yeah. So that's how things, settled down. And there's much more to say, but it's going to have to wait till tomorrow. Okay, so just to talk more about the way the Buddha set up the lifestyle, because the history is important, to know why the Buddha did what he did and what were the circumstances at that time, and how to adapt it to our lives now. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Nothing? Oh, I'm so glad everything is 100% clear. Yes.
A little note about what I've heard from friends of Sravasti Abbey, how they decided to start giving food, and how that came about was that you didn't mention that you had a little bit of food in the cupboard, and there were carrots in the ground out in the yard. You were mining carrots, and and I think Tracy told me that she decided that she was going to make sure her teacher never went hungry. But and also Venerable had been teaching these people for a while as a teacher, and as you see, she's an excellent teacher. So if I don't know, if I just was somewhere and set up, it would be a lot more difficult, because I wouldn't have the same respect from the people, I believe. You had gained a lot of people's respect from teaching them for years, and helped them to know about the Dharma. Yeah. And that's what the Buddha had intended, I believe, is that there was a mutual, reciprocal relationship, where the Dharma was being given to the people, and the people were helping to support the teacher. And there's is it the Tibetan? Does it come from the Tibetan, the saying that if the practitioner can't come into town, the food will roll up the mountain?
Oh, I had never heard that
You
before. Where did?
If people if the monastics practice well, then
Yeah, they say that if you practice well, you won't starve. Yeah.